What's up, everybody? It's Luke James, not the singer. If you're looking to get your music reviewed, you can hit up this email that's right here. But today I'm going to hit you up with my thoughts and opinions on this new album from Rick Ross called Port of Miami 2. Now, Rick Ross is a rapper who's coming out of Carroll City, Florida, and back in 2005 is when he really got it poppin' with his song called Hustlin'. That was actually featured on his album called Port of Miami 1, so this is a sequel that people have been waiting on for quite a while, and it's actually kind of crazy to think that Rick Ross has been in the game that long, man. For someone like myself who's getting up there in age, it really makes me feel old because it seems like he wasn't around for that length of time, and yet he was, man. He's someone who's really been a staple in the game for quite a while now, and he's done really well for himself because of that excellent ear for beats that he has. He's like a goddamn cyborg with super hearing when it comes to picking out these tremendous beats. Usually you get some big bangers and also those exquisite lavish ones. Those are my personal favorite from him. And of course he's also known for the boastful gangsta content he brings in that deep vocal style of his. He's one of those artists that when he shows up on a track, you always know it's him. But when it comes to his albums, man, I usually find that they're kind of a mixed bag, to be honest with you. I always come out of them with a handful of tracks, and like I said, I'm impressed by the production, but they're usually not very cohesive and strong from beginning to end, which is kind of the case here, although there are some things I really did like, and I think that this really might be some of his best work, at least in my opinion. But we're going to start off talking about the single, Act a Fool. We get a pretty solid Wale verse on here where he's making some clever references to Rocky Maivia for just one example. And this is an example of what I'm talking about. This is just a very cookie cutter horn banger that sounds like you've heard it a million times before. It's not awful by any means, and it certainly works as a banger, but it's not overly unique or interesting. Like, I wouldn't miss this if it wasn't on this project because I feel like I've heard it before. And it's the same thing with Born to Kill featuring Jeezy. This is another banger that really isn't too distinct or unique in any sort of way. And again, it's the references on here that make it so fun, man. Both of these tracks have references to stuff like Rocky Maivia, as I said, Candyman, the board game Candyland, and even Hammer Pants. So as someone who came up in the 90s, that shit had me wanting to bounce on my pogo ball, maybe play my Nintendo back here, maybe Bucky O'Hare, that was a classic game, if you know, you know, maybe eat on some bubble tape or some of that Biz Candy. I'm talking that classic 90s shit, man. If you came up during the 90s, you know how damn good it was. We even had those Garbage Pail Kids, Mad magazines, Cracked magazines. Some of that shit actually might have started in the 80s, but anyway, man, I did like some of those references, and I always pick up on references when artists are making those. So those were some of the cool parts of those songs, but overall they are just some pretty standard bangers. And to go along with the standard bangers are a couple of standard thug love joints from Rick Ross. So we have White Lines with Dej Loaf on the ad-libs, and Summer Rain, where we do get a nice SWV sample. I have heard that flipped on some other tracks before. And then we're getting vocals from Summer Walker, who honestly just sounds kind of dry and dull on this one. I didn't think her vocals on this were very powerful or strong in any type of way. And Ross is just doing the usual on here, man. He's just romanticizing and tricking on girls, fly them around the world, let them spend all this money, shop, he's in love with them, light candles, you know how it goes, all that type of shit. And again, just like the other two tracks I mentioned, they're not all out offensive to the ears. It doesn't feel like someone's putting my ears, you know, close to a blender and turning on and ripping them up or some shit like that. It ain't hurting me, but you know, they're just not overly memorable. It feels like I've heard these songs before on past Rick Ross projects and from other artists. They're just not, they're just very familiar is what I would say. So, you know, these type of songs are kind of fillerish to me. You might like them more than me, but they didn't really impress me as much as some of these other tracks. But since I did mention the features, I gotta mention that they are hit or miss on here, just like with other projects that have features, and this has features on pretty much every song, it seems like. For a couple of examples of misses, on I Still Pray, it actually starts off as this very poignant track where Rick Ross is reflecting on that 2018 hospital visit, but then this shit gets sidetracked once Ball Greasy and YFN Lucci come on, croaking like some damn frogs, man. Some robotic, auto-crooning frogs. That shit just really took me out of this song. I just felt like it didn't fit. I didn't think the bars from them were really that special either. And despite a strong performance from Denzel Curry on Running the Streets, I thought that piano beat was duller than a 20-year-old butter knife that someone was trying to, you know, chip their way out of prison with. It was just a very dull and bland beat. I did like Denzel Curry on it. And then you have A Boogie on here who's croaking like an injured frog too. So these are some of the moments that were just hit or miss for me, man. Some of these songs had things that I thought were pretty cool. Then there was stuff happening on the same track that I didn't like, or they were familiar or generic. Formulaic, I think, is a word that you might use for some of these songs. So these are the usual issues you come up with on Rick Ross albums. He gives you some songs that they're not all out trash by any means, but they don't really make you too excited either. You don't really want to tell everybody about them and say, these are some great tracks, man. These are some of the best songs I heard this year. They're just kind of there, man. They're like padding, extra padding, you know what I mean? Like back when you used to wrestle with your boys, you'd be throwing each other off the mattresses and shit. You had to put some extra pillows down so, you know, you weren't actually killing somebody and send them to the hospital or something like that. Extra padding all over these Rick Ross projects. But there are some pretty great features on here too, so we got to show love to that. I feel like I've been kind of negative so far. Maybe not so negative so far, but just not very impressed with what I was hearing. You know, a lot of it was kind of flat. But now I'm going to talk about some of the moments I really did like, including Gunplay. I thought he was flowing perfectly on Nobody's Favorite. Just has this really buttery flow, spitting that gangsta shit you would expect from him. I feel like every time he shows up as a feature, he's really strong, even though his solo projects never really blew me away too much. As for the beat here, it is grimier than a coal miner's fingernails. Absolutely love this beat. It's just hard as hell. And Nipsey Hussle steals the show on Rich Nigga Lifestyle, man. He's on here sending some shots at Tekashi 6ix9ine from beyond the grave as he spits. I can't name a fake nigga that was not exposed. How y'all niggas so surprised that Tekashi told ain't a real street nigga less you got a code. Thought that was a hard ass line. And he also references that little meme from back in the day. Remember, not back in the day, not that long ago, but remember there's that Lakers and Rockets game and they started to scuffle and then he stood up and he was pulling his pants up like he was ready to run in there and throw some punches like Ballrug or some shit. He spit, courtside going viral when them punches thrown. So he had some really memorable lines on here. I thought that one in particular was kind of funny because he saw how people reacted to that shit when it happened and he put it into his song. So that was pretty clever of him. You're getting some smooth vocals from Tiana Taylor on this track as well. And you also might recognize the beat from Jay-Z's song Sweet off of American Gangsta. So I thought that was a pretty cool flip. Again, kind of a familiar moment, which there are more of and I will speak on in a minute, but I still thought that was one of the best tracks and one that you would definitely need to check out on here. Now to scroll down my notes, since I was speaking on some of these recognizable beats, you might notice on the song Turnpike Ike, which is actually one of the singles, that you're getting the same beat from Wale's song called Groundhog Day. It's still one of the standout joints on here as Rick Ross is speaking on deading beef as well as boasting as usual. And then on the song Big Time, we get this glorious Just Blaze production that really reminds me of Jay Electronica's song Exhibit C. I don't know if anyone else picked up on that right away like I did. That shit was hit me over the head like a damn hammer. And despite the familiarity of these beats and how similar they are to other beats that I have heard, I still thought they were really dope. Sometimes I don't like when artists reuse beats or use these familiar samples over and over. Sometimes it doesn't work, but I think Rick Ross pulled it off really well here. And Swizz's ad-libs on Big Time, they weren't that annoying. Sometimes Swizz Beatz is featured on a song and he's just screeching and yelling all over it with that voice like this: Swizzy on the track, Swizzy on the track, Swizzy on the track. See how annoying and cringy it is when I do it? That's like what he's doing on some songs sometimes, man, just yelling too much. But he wasn't too annoying on there. And Ross had some quotables as well, like, I watch your actions, not just captions, and the shit you post, capping on niggas, that shit'll get you smoked. Just sending a couple of shots at the social media gangsters out there, of which there are plenty, as many of us have seen. Now, I also thought that single with Drake called Gold Roses was on point. You're getting this very laid back and mellow vocal produced production that really fits Drake on this song. He's coming through with that vintage style where he's just unloading about everything and working those smooth laid back flows. Thought that was a nice feature. And Ross is right at home over this drowsy production as well. One line that actually kind of made me laugh was when he said, 100-room mansion, but I felt abandoned. Even if I was filthy rich, man, I don't think I would want a 100-room mansion. Can you imagine that shit? I only got 3 floors here, 3 bedrooms, 100 rooms. God damn, man, you would just be cleaning all the time. That shit would be crazy. Either that or you'd be spending all this money for people to clean your shit. Then again, you know, I guess you wouldn't have people in there all the time if you had 100 rooms. The shit would just be kind of like a ghost town. That'd be creepy too. There are just a million reasons why I wouldn't want a house that big, even if I could afford it. But maybe that's just me. And another line that I'm sure made some people laugh is on Bogus Charms when Rick Ross says that all he serves on tracks is facts. We all know about the whole Officer Ricky situation. 50 Cent made that classic song where he was getting at him. Of course, they had all that beef and all that shit from back in the day about him being a CO. But I never really got too caught up in that shit, you know what I mean? I think a lot of rappers are being fraudulent or maybe exaggerating their past or speaking on things in a way that aren't 100% true. So it is what it is. Take from that what you will. But I just thought that kind of stuck out because that's always a talking point with Rick Ross. in regards to how real he is and what he's really about. So thought that was kind of funny. And Bogus Charms, you know, I wasn't a big fan of this track really. I thought the production and the hook kind of had a pop/radio feel to it. But even still, I thought Rick Ross and Meek had some pretty good bars on here. They're just rapping about the fragility of honor in the streets, friends, family, who can you trust, just the code of the streets and that type of shit. So still a pretty good song, just didn't really like the beat and hook too much. It is what it is. Like I said earlier, man, sometimes these songs, they have a couple of things on them that I like, a couple of things I don't, so it is a mixed bag. And if I'm being honest, man, I gotta say that Rick Ross is actually having some of his most introspective moments on this. That's really what makes it some of his better work, although I did like his last album quite a bit as well. You're going to hear him speaking on all kinds of stuff, like on Fascinated, where he reflects on the allure of the streets as well as loved ones that he lost. He's doing it over this very bluesy backdrop. And then on the lavish Justice League produced song called Vegas Residency, he's just lamenting again about his seizures and some of his health issues, as well as Kanye West's MAGA antics. So you're going to pick up on all kinds of stuff throughout here, and the production is just as glorious as you would expect. I mentioned Justice League doing Vegas Residency, and they also did Maybach Music 6, which as soon as you see a song called Maybach Music on a Rick Ross project, you know it's going to be one of the best tracks, which is exactly the case here. You're just getting that classic Rick Ross sound where you're getting John Legend on the vocals, you're also getting this cinematic string and horn production from Justice League, and you get a Wheezy verse that honestly probably isn't that great, man. They should have put the Pusha T verse on there, the Pusha T verse that got cut, because Pusha T was on here saying all kinds of wild shit. I didn't read all the stories about it, but I'm going to assume that Pusha T verse got cut because of lines like this where he spits, "Hell of a year, true colors exposed, crowns on these clowns, it's like you colored they nose. We talking skill set or popularity goals. When you speak truth to the power, your popularity grows." Obviously, he's speaking on some of the shit he went through with Drake. Drake is featured on this album. There's still probably some animosity there, I'm sure. Rick Ross seems to be trying to play the part of getting everybody together. Obviously, Pusha T had problems with Lil Wayne as well, so there's just all these politics involved throughout this album in regards to Pusha T being on here. And I did see something where Rick Ross actually said that he wanted to get all three of them on a song together eventually, which would probably be pretty dope. But like I said, Wheezy's verse on here was just one of those bland, sing-songy Wheezy verses. Of course, he has a line about soft pussy lips that he calls Cottonmouth. Just that tired Lil Wayne that I'm not into, man. I respect Wheezy. Earlier Wayne was some of the dopest shit I ever heard for sure. Like, I'm not hating on Wayne, but just a lot of this newer shit, that auto-croony, always talking about pussy stuff, that to me is the weakest Lil Wayne. That might just be my opinion, but it is what it is. But still, you can check out the Pusha T verse that didn't make it on this song. I actually mentioned some of the bars from it, but just to be clear, it's not on the song. It did get cut, but that verse was floating around and you can still hear it. But at the end of the day, man, I thought this was a pretty solid Rick Ross album. I am going to go with a 3.5 out of 5. I enjoyed a good handful of songs. I liked a lot of the production, but again, man, it's kind of a mixed bag. You're getting some formulaic, standard, generic moments that you feel like you've heard a million times from Rick Ross, so, you know, it's not the most refreshing album or anything like that. But I think the quality is definitely there, so it's worth your time, especially if you're a Rick Ross fan. I don't think you'll be disappointed with this one. But you guys can hit me up in the comments section to let me know your thoughts and opinions, because I always want to know. And make sure you do all that good YouTube and social media stuff where you show me love and you show me lots of it. Thank you for watching, everybody. I will see you next time.